You learn how to knit, you're excited to dive into the techniques and the lingo, you make your first hat, your first scarf, but there are one or two phrases and phenomenon in the knitting world that you never quite figured out, and at this point, you're kind of too scared to ask. What does work even mean? You might see in a pattern, like it sets you up with what you need to do, and then the instructions just say work even for 12 inches. So what does work even mean? It just means keep doing what you're doing great. For the most part, I see work even written in patterns when there is zero shaping, zero complication. It's just basically stockinette stitch, maybe with a few exceptions. But work even just means keep doing what you're doing. You're gonna keep cruising for a couple of inches. We'll check back in when you're done. Why is yarn sold in skeins instead of balls? So if you've shopped for yarn, you might have noticed that it comes in different packagings. Sometimes yarn comes in a ball. They look something like this. They can have slightly different shapes. The key is you take the label off and you can start knitting from these right away. They won't tangle, they won't become a mess, and often you can pull from the center or the outside. The skein looks like this, and when you open it up, it looks like one giant loop. Now you cannot knit directly from this loop. You have to take this yarn and wind it into a ball. Why is yarn sold in a skein like this if you can't knit directly from it? For yarn like this one, which is hand dyed, it's easier for the dyer to access all of the strands, to get that dye to evenly penetrate the yarn, and to paint the type of design they want directly onto the yarn when it's all open like this. But this yarn isn't hand dyed and it's still sold in a skein. And that can just be because winding your yarn into a ball can put a lot of pressure on the fibers. Imagine wearing your hair pulled back into a super tight ponytail day after day after day. It would start to pull at your hairline, maybe give you a headache. That's kind of how yarn is when it's wound into a ball. Having your yarn in a skein is kind of like just leaving your hair loose. It feels relaxed. It can kind of take its natural shape. If you store your yarn in a ball wound tightly for a really long time and then you knit something from it, it can actually mess up your gauge because once you block it, that yarn will pull back into its original form and it can make something smaller than you intended. So if your yarn comes in a skein, it's always a good idea to store it in a skein until you're just about to knit from it. Why is it called frogging? When you have to rip out your knitting for any reason, it doesn't feel great. You've put tons of time into this work, so taking all that hard work out can feel pretty devastating. So we call it frogging as kind of a laugh so you don't cry situation. When you rip out your yarn, you're going to rip it, which sounds a lot like ribbit, the sound a frog makes, hence frogging. Why does negative ease sound bad? So the word negative ease isn't bad. It really just has to do with measurements of a garment. Ease is the amount of distance between the fabric of your garment and your body. A garment with positive ease has a positive number measurement between the body and the garment. So this sweater I'm wearing has positive ease. It's pretty roomy on me. It's oversized. Zero ease is when the measurement of the garment is exactly the same as the measurement of your body. There is zero space in between the garment and your skin. It is skin tight. And negative ease is when there is a negative number, a negative difference between the size of the garment and your body. The sweater is smaller than your body is. Imagine like a swimsuit where you have to stretch it on over your body, or imagine like a really fitted sweater where you want it to almost stretch over you. That would be a sweater knit with negative ease. It can be a great thing for certain garments and certain fits. Why do some people say gauge is optional and some say it's mandatory? Because sometimes gauge is optional and sometimes it's mandatory. Knitting a gauge swatch is the way that you calibrate your stitches to the inch with the designer's stitches to the inch. That is the way that you ensure your garment is going to fit when you're done knitting it. So if your designer got 4 stitches to the inch and you get 4 stitches to the inch, all of the measurements should line up so your finished garment is exactly the right size for you. If you get 3 stitches to the inch when your designer got 4, all of the measurements will be off. Your sweater may be way too big or way too small because your gauge doesn't match what it needs to be. So if you're knitting a sweater, whether it be fitted or oversized, and you want the finished garment to be fitted or oversized, you should just knit a square and make sure that you're calibrated before you dive in. But if you're knitting something like a scarf, the size doesn't really matter. If that scarf is 1 inch wider or 1 inch narrower, it truly won't make that big of a difference in your experience of wearing that scarf. So I probably wouldn't knit a gauge swatch for something like that unless the exact width of that garment was extremely important to me. Why does my project look different from the pattern photo? Knitting is a handmade craft, and anytime something is handmade, it is going to look a little bit different and a little bit unique, and that's what makes it special. If our goal is to perfectly recreate the pattern photo, we are likely in the wrong craft because there are so many small variables that will change the way your garment looks so it's not exactly like the project photo. I encourage you to Try and release yourself from the pressure of perfectly replicating the project photo and just embrace that you are making something handmade and it's going to look completely unique, and that's what makes it special. Why did my gauge change partway through a project? Are you okay? When I was an intern at Vogue Knitting magazine, one Friday I went into the office and I was told that a staff member was having a baby, and everyone on the team had decided to knit a square, seam them together to make a baby blanket as a gift. Only no one had knit their square. So I was told to sit down and knit squares all day to try and get this blanket complete before the office baby shower. And I will tell you that at the beginning of the day, my squares were a perfect 5 by 5 inches. But as the day went on, they got smaller and smaller because I got more and more nervous about the time limit and my tension got tighter. Our gauge does react and respond to our emotional state, and if you're feeling really stressed, your tension will probably get tighter. It's not common, but it can happen. Why are there so many types of decreases? Slip, slip, knit, knit two together, slip one, knit one, pass, slip, stitch over. Each of these decreases leans in a different direction in a different way, and they add a slightly different visual effect. And it isn't really dramatic, but over time, it can lead to a slightly more finished, polished looking garment. So if we have decreases on both sides of a garment, you might do a slip slip knit on this side and knit two together on this side so that your decreases are all coming in at a really nice clean angle and they're mirroring each other. So slip slip knit should be a perfect mirror to knit two together to really lead to a nice clean line in our finished garment. If you were to decrease a different way, the overall shape of your garment would still look right, but the lines that wind up in your knitting would look a little bit different. So blocking is one of the steps in finishing your garment, and it usually means soaking that garment in room temperature water, perhaps with some wool wash, allowing the garment to really rest and relax in that gentle bath, wringing it out, and then laying it flat to dry. Often we will shape it to dry, and that does not mean stretching it. I have a whole video on blocking and how I do it and some sort of missteps that can happen here. So if you want more in-depth on how blocking works, you can watch this video. Why is it called blocking? So to the best of my knowledge, we call it blocking because it is a reference back to a millinery term. In hat making, hats would be created perhaps out of felt and then stretched out over wooden forms and allowed to dry. And that's what gave hats their shape. Often they were specialized wooden blocks that would be used to stretch out hats. And so the term came from the hat making world and transferred over onto knitting. What is the point of an interchangeable needle set, and do I need one? The short answer is you do not need an interchangeable needle set. The long answer is it can make your life easier in a couple of different ways. If you are getting into knitting, you are just starting out, you want to try lots of different more styles of garments. Socks and sweaters and hats, chunky things, really fine things. An interchangeable needle set might be right for you. The reason an interchangeable needle set is great in this scenario is it gives you all the tools you could possibly need to knit all of those different things in one place. It really opens up the world of knitting and all of its possibilities to you. There are also some fun things you can do with interchangeable knitting needles, like use the tightening hole to insert a lifeline, change out the needle tips while the garment stays on the cable. You can have some fun with the interchangeable needle sets. But if you aren't sure that you're committed to knitting as a hobby, you're just trying it out for the first time, I wouldn't dive in with an interchangeable set because they are quite pricey. I would start by just buying a fixed needle or two, playing around, knitting your first projects, and then deciding if you want to really make a monetary commitment to this hobby. But if you know you're getting into this hobby, you don't have a whole lot of tools yet, you want to have all the tools you need in one go, I'd say go for it. Do expensive needles really matter? Or is this a scam? I used to be so anti-expensive name brand things because I really did feel like there wasn't enough of a difference in quality to justify the high price and people were just buying it for the name brand. But my perspective on that has changed a little bit when it comes to knitting needles because sometimes you're buying both for quality and for the ethics behind the product. And some of the more expensive knitting needle brands out there right now, like Addie's and Chowgoo's, are family-owned companies. And when you're comparing them against a budget brand that may have a great quality product but be private equity owned, you may choose to pay a premium and support a small business. If you are interested in specifically interchangeable needles, I do have a review video coming up where I go through a bunch of the more popular brands and do a quality and value review. Why does everyone hate acrylic yarn? So acrylic yarn is pretty polarizing. I think that you'll find a lot of strong opinions online. Some people really hate acrylic yarn, refuse to work with it, only work with 100% wool and alpaca, natural fibers. And some people are really into acrylic yarn. It's budget friendly, it's really accessible, and it's easy to wash and wear. I don't think there's anything wrong with acrylic. I think it has its place. I also personally love working with natural fibers, but for certain projects, I would only work with acrylic. Every yarn has a different purpose. But if you're really focusing on natural fibers and supporting heritage sheep breeds and local yarn and things like that, you're rarely going to find things that are acrylic. You're mostly going to find wool. Why does knitting take so long? Because knitting is not a speed sport. Part of its beauty and its charm is that it is slow and it takes time. And I think in a world where we have become so accustomed to instant gratification, to ordering something online and get it the next day within 3 hours, it's become almost instantaneous. The opportunity to have delayed gratification, forced delayed gratification, I think is kind of a novelty in this day and age. I will say I have a whole video on knitting faster. If you can insert knitting into more of your life, you may find that you make more progress in your garments and it feels like you are knitting faster. If you picked up knitting because you wanted to crank out garments, I am afraid you picked the wrong craft. This isn't the one where you're going to crank out a lot of garments in a short period of time. It takes time. It just does. That's all the questions I had today. I hope that I answered some of those burning questions that you might have been wondering about. And if I didn't answer your question, please make sure to drop it in the comments. I would love to make another video like this one, answering more of those knitting questions you might have been too scared to ask. If you want to catch me outside of YouTube, you can find me on Patreon, where I have monthly knit nights with my patrons, and I give away all the tools that I review on this channel. As always, it's been really great to talk about knitting with you today, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.